The title of this story is Shocking Mum. Shocking Mum. Text by Fiona Tuakoi. Illustrations by Phyllis Harris. Mum gets a shock. "Ow!" cried Mum, pulling her hand back from the car door with a jerk. "That's my 4th shock today. Did you hear the crack?" Jackson shrugged. "Didn't hear a thing," he said. Mum shook her head grimly. "It was a real beauty," she said. "And this morning, when I went to unlock the car, real sparks came out of the keys." She stood for a moment, then took a deep breath and reached out her hand again. She gave Jackson a relieved smile as she took hold of the door handle. "Nothing that time," she said. "Maybe my electricity's been cut off." Jackson grinned at her joke, but he could tell she was worried. It seemed like every time Mum went near the car lately, she got a shock. No wonder she took her time reaching for the handle, he thought. She knew what was coming. Mum psychs herself up. Jackson and Mum got into the car and drove to town. Mum parked beside a white van, leaving a wide space on her side. "So I can get out without touching the door," she said sheepishly. Jackson got out and waited while Mum carefully avoided the door and used her foot to push it shut. He watched as Mum took a deep breath and started psyching herself up to lock the car. "Hang on, Mum," said Jackson. "Let me do it." He rushed around to her side and reached for the keys. Mum smiled at him gratefully. "I feel a bit silly," she said. "But I really have had enough shocks for one day." She stepped back to give Jackson room to get by. "It's easy for me," said Jackson. "I don't get shocks." He brushed past Mum, then jumped at a sudden crack. "Ow!" he cried, rubbing his chest to take the sting away. Mum looked really upset. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know I could pass them on." Jackson locked the car and shoved the keys into his pocket. "You're wasted here, you know," he said to Mum as they walked up the street. "We should plug you in at home. Imagine how much we'd save on the electricity bill." Static electricity. That night, Jackson decided to do some research. There must be something they could do about the shocks, he thought, as he turned on the computer. He went online and searched for car door electric shocks. Flicking through a few sites, he found that Mum's problem was caused by static electricity. "No good for powering the TV then," thought Jackson with a grin. He entered Cure Static Electricity and scrolled down the first page of results. Good! There were several likely-looking sites to choose from. He settled down for a good read. Off with shoes and socks. The next morning, Jackson went straight to Mum and Dad's bedroom. "When you get dressed today, Mum," he said, "don't put on your shoes." "What?" said Mum in surprise. Jackson grinned. "I'll explain later," he said. "Just don't put your shoes and socks on until you're in the car." Mum gave him a funny look, but she nodded. Jackson got himself ready for school and then followed Mum down the path towards the garage. Mum stood beside the car, jiggling from one frozen foot to the other. "There had better be a good reason for this," she groaned. "It's an experiment," said Jackson, opening his door. "Come on, get in the car." Mum reached nervously for the door handle. She braced herself for the shock and then flashed Jackson a look of surprise. "Nothing," she said. Yes! Cried Jackson, punching the air victoriously. He flung his bag into the back seat and climbed in. Is it the shoes? Mum got into the car, rubbed the feeling back into her feet and put her socks and shoes on. So, it's my shoes, she said uncertainly. Jackson shook his head. Not exactly, he said, pulling his door shut. It's static electricity. Mum looked surprised. That's what I thought to start with, she said. But I couldn't work out how I was building up the charge. I don't drag my feet or rub against anything, and you need friction for static electricity, don't you? People say that, said Jackson, putting on his seatbelt. But you get friction from just putting different surfaces together and pulling them apart again, like when you comb your hair and it sticks up and crackles. Mum laughed. Okay, Einstein, she said. How do you explain the fact that I walked down here and didn't get a shock? She started the car and backed out of the garage. Easy, said Jackson, hitting the remote button for the garage door. You didn't have your shoes on to insulate you, so you were grounded the whole time. The charges didn't build up because they had a way out. Mum nodded thoughtfully as she drove up the street. That makes sense, she said. But I can't go around with bare feet all day. You don't have to go around with bare feet, said Jackson. There are other ways to get rid of the charges. Like what? Said Mum. She stopped at the corner, then turned into the main road. Use your knuckles. You could get shoes that don't insulate you, said Jackson. But you'd probably have to try lots of different kinds to find out which ones work best. Mum rolled her eyes. Are there any less expensive options? She asked. Jackson put on his best innocent look. I did read somewhere that soles made out of old tyre treads work well, he said. Mum snorted loudly. I don't think so, she said. Jackson grinned. Luckily there are other ways, he said. You can grab the metal frame of the door as you get out of the car. That'll make any electricity that's built up while you were driving go away. You can also get rid of small amounts of electricity by touching things like glass or wood. Or you could knock your knuckles against the door handle before you grab it. How would that help? Asked Mum, pulling up at the traffic lights. Knuckles don't have as many nerve endings as fingers, said Jackson, so it doesn't hurt as much. Terrific, said Mum, rolling her eyes. She shot Jackson an amused look. How about a pain-free way? She said. Well, you could do what you did yesterday morning, said Jackson as they turned into the school driveway. Hold your keys tightly and use them to touch the metal door. Sparks will go shooting out the end of the keys, but it won't hurt you at all. It might scare me to death, though, muttered Mum. Jackson grabbed his bag and opened the door. Don't worry, Mum, he said cheerfully. It'll be summer soon, and you don't get static shocks when it's humid. He grinned as he slammed the door shut and flicked his bag onto his shoulder. Just remember to keep getting rid of the charge, he yelled. Mum gets another shock. Jackson couldn't wait to get home after school that day to see if his advice had worked. So, how did it go? He asked Mum, dumping his bag on the couch and heading for the kitchen. Great, said Mum. I haven't had a shock all day. She frowned at Jackson's bag, then picked it up and started towards his bedroom. Leave that, Mum, called Jackson with his mouth full of apple. I'll take it. I want to tidy up my room anyway. Mum sat down suddenly with a stunned look on her face. Now that's what I call a shock, she said. Jackson rolled his eyes and headed for the bedroom.
You be the reporter and write a newspaper front page story about shocking mum. Click on front page to start. Make your own picture. Click on help to watch a demonstration. Complete your ID card by typing in your name. Set a date. Choose the month. Choose the day. Great, that's today's date. Type in a name for your newspaper. Click on a headline for your story. Local boy solves electrifying mystery. Type your story. Drag a picture for your story onto the newspaper front page. Click Next when you've finished. Write a caption or label for the picture. Check your newspaper carefully. If you want to make any changes, click on the Revise button beside the part you want to change. Now print your newspaper.
Word detective. Look at these sentences from Shocking Mum. Read the words or click on Listen, then click Next. That night, Jackson decided to do some research. There must be something they could do about the shocks, he thought, as he turned on the computer. Click on the word in the text that matches the meaning. Try and find 3 words before the timer runs out. Click on the speaker to hear the meaning. Click Go to start. Opposite of day. Night. Opposite of day. Great. Chose a plan. Decided. Chose a plan. Good job. Collect facts. Research. Collect facts. Nice work. You got all 3 right. Night. Opposite of day. Decided. Chose a plan. Research. Collect facts. Click on play again to have another turn, or print to print your results. Snappy slideshow. Type your name and click Next. Let's create a slideshow. Choose your pictures. Click Yes if you are happy with. Click or drag 6 pictures one by. Now have fun with the toolbox. Now choose your background music. Click Next to view your. Now save your slideshow by clicking on Save. You can stop the music by clicking on the Music button.
Sequence. A sequence is the order that things happen. Like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Drag and drop these pictures into the correct sequence. One, 2, 3, 4. Drag and drop these pictures into the correct sequence. One, 2, 3, 4. Now drag and drop the words into the correct sequence to match the pictures. My pie. Ha ha ha. I throw my pie. Splat. My pie. I throw my pie. Splat. Ha ha ha. Oops. Pie from the sky. Now you know what a sequence is.